Modzelewski had a good job, lived in a middle-class neighborhood in Aspen, and was generally enjoying the trappings of success when he decided to give it all up. He set out to find what he describes as raw, unharnessed wilderness. And he found it on Blackfish Sound in the Inside Passage, the rugged coastline between Seattle and Alaska. There he spent 18 months. Michael joins us now to talk about the book he wrote about the experience called Inside Passage. Welcome to the News at Noon. You know, Michael, a lot of people think of doing what you did. We think, gee, it would be nice to get away from the rat race and give up all of our trappings, but most of us never do it. What made you go ahead and quit your job, sell all of your personal belongings, and head out into the wilderness?
Well, when I was living in Aspen, I saw a movie. Sometimes a film or a book will change your life, and it was called Jeremiah Johnson with Robert Redford. And I came out of the film wondering if, in the 20th century, a young person could go out into the wilderness and live like a mountain man with the Indians. And there's an old saying, be careful what you ask for, you just might get it. And 2 months later, I'm living on an island 200 miles north of Vancouver and about 100 years back in time.
You know, when I was handed this book to read and I was told that I was going to interview you, I thought, boy, he probably looks like a caveman, has a long, huge beard, and walks like a Neanderthal, but you look like a pretty normal guy.
Well, actually, I love the wild world and I love the civilized world as well, going to the opera and ballet and things like that.
Nice to hear that you're a well-rounded person. Now, let's talk about the landscape and the seascape of this area. It obviously drew you there. So could you describe it?
It's a beautiful land of about 1,000 islands from Seattle all the way up to Alaska. And there's 8,000-foot peaks that come right out of the ocean with hanging glaciers. And it's just gorgeous country, combination of land and water. And
we have some pictures. Now, this is you in a kayak. Could you describe that?
Yes, this is kayaking, and it's one of the best ways to get around if you want to observe the wildlife, because unlike a big boat with an engine on it, this way you can slip around the islands very silently and see wolves and cougars and bears right there around you.
And not a lot of people, obviously.
No. And there's all these little pocket coves where you can actually stick the bow of your boat right there and have a sandwich or eat your lunch. So it's really magic country to kayak in.
Now, I thought maybe initially that you lived out in the bush and just had a simple little tent, but you were lucky enough someone gave you a small cottage with a pot-bellied stove, so you weren't actually living out, roughing it in the wilderness, so to speak.
Well, the wilderness was all around me, and I had, you know, a cabin with a wood stove in it and lots of fish in the front yard. You know, but you take 10 steps away from the cabin and there were cougar tracks and black bear tracks around you, so it was right there.
So you hunted for your own food and fished. Tell me about that. What was that like?
Yeah, I had a half-acre garden, and then the killer whales are there because the salmon are there. And one of the greatest salmon runs in the world comes up through the Inside Passage. So I would go out with the big fishing boats and throw my line in, and I think I went out every day just about to catch fish, and I think there were only 5 times that I didn't come home with dinner.
Now, what about money? You guess there wouldn't be a need to have much of it on you.
No, in fact, the year and a half that I was there, I spent the grand total of $240.
Excuse me, what's that?
That is a banana slug that is going through the rainforest. And
now, would you eat something like that?
No. I'd stay away from the banana slugs, but just about everything else, because the Indians have a saying that when the tide goes out, the table is set, meaning that there's plenty to forage for on the beach.
That's okay. Let's get back to the money. Now, you said you only spent about $240. What would you spend even $240 on?
I'd go into Alert Bay, the nearest town, which is on the Indian reservation, and buy things like coffee and potatoes and, you know, just basic staples.
Are you glad that you did it? I mean, did you go into this wilderness thinking, I'm going to write a book and make lots of money with this experience?
At that time, I didn't even think I would be writing a book. And I would write letters home to my friends, and they kept all of those letters. And when I came back to civilization, they gave them back to me. And when I put them together by date, it was almost as if I had a first draft. But the experience was so unusual because of the wildlife and just being civilized and finding that piece of wilderness, you know, that's still left in this late in time in the 20th century. I'm
wondering how long it took for you to adjust to the climate and the surroundings, and once you did, how has it changed you?
Well, It took probably about 2 weeks to get used to the rain, because from November to February it rains anywhere from 100 to 200 inches.
Wow.
And most of that falls just continuously in a couple months. So once I adapted to that, and also the solitude, because the first winter I went for 67 days without seeing another person. So once I made the adjustment, all of my senses opened up, and a lot of talents that we don't have here in the city, they come back to you in the wilderness when you're tested every day.
Well, I hope I can say welcome back to civilization. I was really fascinated by this book. It's called Inside Passage, Living with Killer Whales, Bald Eagles, and Quackoodle Indians?
Quackoodle Indians.
Quackoodle Indians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.